You're watching the chapter number 8 of the Blender Materials Textures and Nodes course, Manipulating Textures. In today's chapter, we'll be understanding about all these topics and we'll also understand about their practical usage in the retro gaming arcade scene that we have been creating in this chapter. And for anyone who's new to this course, you can watch the previous 7 chapters from the link of the playlist given in the pinned comment. So I've opened this materials file where we created this brick texture in the last chapter, and right now let's start with the first topic of today's chapter, which is the gradient texture node. So to understand it, let's first hide this cube from the scene. So press H to hide it, select the UV sphere, and to create a new material, go to the material properties, click on the plus icon and then on the new button. After this, we'll have the default principal BSDF added in the shader editor, and to apply this material to the UV sphere, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all and click on the assign button in the material properties. And now to add the gradient texture node in the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to texture and select the gradient texture. Let's place it over here and connect the color socket to the base color. Now to understand about the working of the gradient texture in the 3D viewport, I'll change the mode from the rendered preview mode to the material preview mode. By doing this, we are able to notice the difference in the texture in a much better way. Now the gradient texture node allows you to create a material showing the transition of one color into another, and by default we can also see that there is a transition between the black color and the white color in the texture applied. Now suppose you want to change the area of this black and the white color, then for this we have to use a node which is called the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, then go to converter and select the color ramp. Now place it in between the gradient texture and the principal BSDF node. Now the color ramp node will allow you to control the different colors in the texture. Over here we have two pointers. The first is the black pointer and the second is the white pointer. And if I select the black pointer by left clicking and drag it to move it like this, then you will notice that by moving this pointer we are able to control the black color in the texture. In a similar way, if I take this white pointer and move it like this, then its influence will be observed on the white color of the texture. Now if you want, you can even change these colors from black and white to some other colors of your choice. For example, suppose I want to convert this white color into red. So to do this thing, with the white pointer selected in the color ramp node, click here and change the color from this color wheel. By doing this, we are able to make the texture in such a way that it shows the transition between the black color and the red color. Similarly, let's select the black pointer and change the color from here. So first increase the brightness with this brightness slider, and I'll change this color to the yellow color. With this, we are now having the gradient texture showing the transition between the yellow and the red colors. In a similar way, you can even add some more colors in this gradient texture. And to do this, simply click on this plus icon in the color ramp, and now we have one more pointer added in between the previous two pointers. Now with this selected, click here to change the color, and I'll change this one to the blue color. And in this case, we now have the gradient texture showing the transition of colors from the yellow color to blue, and then we have the red color. Also, the way how these colors will blend with each other can be controlled by the interpolation method selected. By default, the linear is selected, but if I change this to ease, then you might not notice much difference in the blending of colors. Similarly, if I change this to cardinal, then in this case also, you will hardly notice any difference in the way how these colors are blending. But if I change this to constant, then in this case, all these colors are no more blending with each other, but instead they are simply painted over the UV sphere depending upon the position of different pointers in the color ramp. But for now, I'll change this back to linear, and in a similar way, we can also change the gradient type from here. By default, the linear is selected, but you can try to change it to other types also in order to get different results. So to keep the thing simple, you can understand the gradient texture in this way, that this particular texture is useful to create transition of different colors, and to set those colors and their positions, we use the color ramp node. After this, let's now move to the next topic of this chapter, which is the noise texture. So for this, I'll go to the shader editor, select the gradient texture and the color ramp node, and press X to delete. Now press Shift plus A, then go to texture and select the noise texture. Let's place it over here. And now the noise texture is used to create textures with some noise or detailing added to them. To practically understand this, I'll first take the color socket in the noise texture and will connect it to the base color in the principal BSDF. Now we'll basically get this particular texture with some colors blending with each other, and then we have various controls using which we can change the way how the texture will look. For example, if I try to increase the scale value, then obviously the scaling of the texture will change. Similarly, if I try to change the detail value and increase it, then the texture will become more detailed, but if I reduce it, then now the texture texture will be less detailed. Then we have the roughness value, which will control the blending of colors with each other. If I reduce it to the minimum value of 0, then we'll have a smoother blending of colors. But if I increase the roughness value, then in this case we'll have a rough pattern or the blending of colors. Then we have the distortion, which will simply distort the texture that is created on the UV sphere. However, in most of the cases, instead of connecting the color socket to the base color, we use the factor socket in the noise texture to connect it to the base color, because that will actually allow us to create some detailed, realistic looking materials with the colors of our own choice. So I'll take the factor socket and connect it to the base color in the principal BSDF node, and by doing this, we are now having a random black and white texture applied on the UV sphere. If I try to change the scale value, then the scaling of the noise on the texture will change, and similar is the case with all the other parameters in the noise texture. Now what if you want to create a noise texture with some specific colors? Then for this, we'll again use the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, then go to converter and select the color ramp. Let's place it in between the noise texture and the principal BSDF node. Now I'll use these pointers in the color ramp node to change the way how different colors will appear in the noise texture. You can clearly see that if I increase the distance between the black and the white pointers, then in this case we are having the different shades of grey color, which can also be seen in this texture. However, if I bring these two pointers closer, then in this case, the shades of grey between the two pointers will be much lesser, and its impact is also visible on the texture which is applied. Now to change the colors, with the white pointer selected, click here, and suppose I change this to the red color, and similarly for the second pointer, I'll select this, then click here, increase the brightness, and let's change this to the yellow color. And by doing this, we are able to create a texture which has some noise and some detailing, and we can control the colors with the help of the color ramp node. Similarly, we can also add some more colors in the texture by clicking on this plus icon and then change the color from here. Then to adjust the way how these colors will appear in the texture, you simply need to adjust the position of these pointers in the color ramp node. Now suppose you want to create a detailed wood texture by using the noise texture. Then to do this thing, I'll first remove the noise texture and the color ramp node in the shader editor. Now press Shift plus A again, then go to texture and select the noise texture. Let's place it over here, and now I'll connect the factor socket to the base color. After this, in order to make the streaks of wood, we have to use the vector mapping node that will allow us to scale this texture in a particular axis. So go to the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to vector and select the mapping node. Let's place it over here. Now connect the vector socket to the vector in the noise texture, but right now we are not able to see the texture on this UV sphere in the 3D viewport, and that's because we need to add some input in the vector mapping node. And whenever you have to add an input to the vector mapping node, you must use the texture coordinate node. So to add it here, press Shift plus A, then go to input and select the texture coordinate node. We'll place it over here, and now I'll take the object socket and connect it to the vector in the mapping node. By doing this, we'll again have the texture applied on the UV sphere. And yes, in most of the cases, whenever you're using the mapping node connected to a texture, do ensure to use the texture coordinate node with the generated socket or the object socket connected. Now to create the wood streaks, go to the scale value and we'll try to change it in different axes to see the results. For example, when I try to change the scaling in the x-axis, we got this result of the noise texture being scaled in such a way that it actually looks like the streaks of wood. Now moving ahead, let's also apply some colors to the wood texture. So go to the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to converter and select the color ramp node. We'll place it over here in between the noise texture and the principal BSDF. Then with the first pointer selected, let's move it here, and I'll keep this to the black color. Then with the second pointer, I'll change this one to the brown color. So in the color wheel, let's take the pointer to somewhere around the orange color and reduce the brightness to make it look like the brown color. After this, try to adjust the position of these pointers in the color ramp node in order to get a realistic looking wood texture. Similarly, you can also try to change other parameters like the detail value, the scaling, the roughness in the noise texture, and also the scale value in the x-axis in the mapping node. And after all the adjustments are made, we'll have the wood texture created in our scene. Let's also go to the rendered view in order to see how it looks with the Cycles render engine. And with this, we created the wood texture with the help of the noise texture node and the vector mapping node that we used to change the scale value in the x-axis in order to create the wood streaks. After that, we use the color ramp node in order to control the different colors, and then we adjusted some values in different parameters to give this a better look. Also, let's save this material that we created in the material asset library. So for this, click here and we'll rename this material to wood, and to save it, go to the scene collection and with the sphere selected, left click to select the wood material, then right click and select mark as a set. And yes, if you wish to download this particular Blender file with all the materials that we have saved in this course, then you can join the Patreon, whose link is added in the description of this video. And now it's the time to use some of the concepts that we covered today in the retro gaming arcade scene that we started creating in the chapter number 1 of this course. So I've opened this file where in the last chapter we added some simple images as the image textures on the gaming machine, then we used the brick texture and the checker texture for the wall and the floor. And in this particular chapter, we'll be applying the wood texture that we just created to all these faces in the corner which are currently having the yellow emission material. So to do this, let's first change this window from the shader editor to the asset browser. And now here we have the wood texture that we saved in the material library. Now to use this material of the wood texture, select the gaming machine, then go to the material properties and click on the plus icon in order to create a new material slot. After this, left click on the wood texture, drag it and drop it on this particular slot that we just created. Now in order to assign this particular material to all the faces that are currently having this yellow colored material, we first need to select that yellow material in the material properties, which in this particular file is the material.001. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, deselect everything, and to assign all the faces that are having this material applied, simply click on the select button. By doing this, we'll now be having all those faces selected in the scene. Now in the material properties, scroll down and select the wood material. Click on the assign button, and with this, we are now having the wood texture that we created applied on the selected faces. And by doing this, we can also check how this wood texture is actually looking when it is applied on a 3D model in a particular scene. And currently, I don't think that we need to make any other changes in this wood texture. However, one small thing that I can notice here is that we have not applied the wood texture on this group of faces which is surrounding the screen. So to solve this problem, let's first go to the solid mode and also disable the real-time display of the bevel tool. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, and with the alt key holded, select this face loop. After this, go to the material properties and with the wood material selected, click on the assign button. And after this, let's also turn on the real-time display of the bevel modifier. Then go to the render preview mode, and finally this is how the wood texture is now looking being applied on the gaming machine. And with this, we also arrived to the end of this chapter. Today we learnt about some important textures and even other nodes like the color ramp node, the texture coordinate, the vector mapping node, and then we even use their concepts in this particular scene. And yes, if you want to download the Blender file containing the complete retro gaming arcade scene, then you can join the Patreon, whose link is available in the description of this video. And so our next chapter will be the chapter number 9, Magic and Environment Texture. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.